Hi and welcome everyone. We're just going to give everyone a few quick minutes to log in before we get started. Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of the Beroe Product Showcase series. My name is Subal Tanvi and I'm a part of the Beroe Product Marketing team. Some very quick housekeeping. Please add your questions to the Q&A section. You will also have the option to upvote questions from other participants, so we know which questions majority of you would like us to address. And we hope to address several of your questions towards the end of this session. And also during an interactive part of today's session, we will request you to also use the chat. Today's session is Go Beyond the Hype, your playbook for the era of autonomous negotiations. And we're keeping it practical, clear, and genuinely useful. In the next hour, you'll get a grounded view of what autonomous negotiations really are, what they're not, and where they create real impact. And leading us through this is Dr. Christian Paul. Christian brings over 15 years of negotiation strategy experience, working as a consultant on high-stake deals across industries, and for over a decade also in scaling negotiation techniques with digital solutions. He's a game theory specialist and early thinker in AI-driven negotiation design, and the founder of nnamu, our autonomous negotiation solution here at Beroe. So with that, I'm thrilled to hand it over to Christian.
I'm also German, which means I'm extremely blunt. I think we all know these types of webinars. They can get a little awkward for the presenter, to be honest with you, because you're speaking a little bit into the void. We want to involve you today during the session, where, as Sybil said, you can always use the Q&A session, but we also have two interactive elements that we want to run with you as a poll. And also as your feedback, thinking about things, and then we want to make it a little more awkward even, because during the time that you're thinking, we will take like 2 to 3 minute pauses as well. So thank you all for joining us for the webinar on going beyond the hype of autonomous negotiations, and talking about what they are. So as you've heard from Sybil's intro already, we are also a provider in that space. We still forced ourselves to try to be as neutral as possible, and talking about what are those things and where they're good in, where they're not good in. How can you assess if something is the right fit for you? There are a lot of things today which I sincerely hope our colleagues over in sales will never see, because we are not fulfilling everything that you see today. Let me give you a little background. That was the first tech issue. On who Beroe is. For those of you who don't know us, Beroe was founded roughly 20 years ago with the mission to fill the gaps in market intelligence that at that point in time existed on the procurement side, where usually the suppliers were better informed than the buyers could be. Amongst other things, and like as a major development, this data and market intelligence, Beroe then took it relatively early on, a good decade ago, to translate it into a SaaS platform and to move from pure data and market intelligence into insights and decision options. And yet again, Beroe has been very early to turn it one step further and translate those insights and decision options also into concrete outcomes. One of the key elements there surely is the our negotiations, which is where Beroe acquired nnamu. That's the company, as Subal said, I founded, which is now a product within the Beroe space. So that's our background, and that's why we think we can contribute something to the discussion of what autonomous negotiations really are. Before we give you our version, though, we would start right away to kind of break the ice a little bit and get you thinking about things for the first time. We have broken down a would you rather. You all know the game that one likes to play on like long car drives. So would you rather A or B? And we turned this into the would you rather autonomous negotiation. And if the tech works out, which we're quite confident will, you should see in a few seconds 6 would you rather questions on your screen. We would ask you to take 2 to 3 minutes, read through them and answer them. And we promise you to be quiet during that time.
We'll just give all of you a few quick 30 seconds to allow all of you to be able to submit your responses, and then we can review the results.
All right, by now you should all see the results on your screen. We have run similar webinar and the same poll a few weeks back at the event that Beroe, Gilbert, and Sid hosted in London called ProcureTex, and I can see already that your results are pretty similar. So let's go through them one by one. The first question was about what's more important, compliance and control, or something that excites and enriches buyers' work. There's a super clear answer on that one. As for the next question, the next one, question number 2, was basically distinguishing between the better and the quicker. So should an autonomous negotiation kind of enable more techniques and better negotiations than the current process? So it's like an 85-15 there. And we had question number 3, where the field is like divided a little more on whether the autonomous should mean augmenting work or fully automating it. Then same for question number 4, where it was like, is it about reducing capability variation or improve them. Then a relatively strong and clear answer on the last two questions, just like a few weeks ago. Is that autonomous negotiation something which you have in mind for a very specific area or across everything that you touch, where the latter is like with 81%? And lastly, is it something that you feel threatened by or that you feel excited about? It's very good. I'm super happy to hear that only 7% of you want to pull the covers over your head and just forget about it. Not very surprising, given that you wanted to participate in this webinar here. I would like to add a little bit of real-life data to this one as well. So what you can see on the screen now are some numbers that the colleagues from the Supply Chain magazine ran this year. So roughly speaking, there's an increase of procurement workload by about 10%, but at the same point in time, there's only an increase in team size by 1%. And I think we all know that it's not always that easy to excite young talent to join procurement, although it is the most crucial and the most interesting part of business work. I would say my first reaction when I saw those two numbers is that I think the CFOs and whoever made the budget for the team size already anticipated a few AI-driven improvements, I would say. But putting all that aside, professionals working in procurement, just like everyone else these days, wants to be excited about what they work on. I think it's fair to say that in particular in the negotiation space, the opposite is often the case. It's often more a situation of limit and frustration when using kind of the usual legacy software. So surely, and that's also what we see with clients of ours, the first thing they tell us about the new tools and solutions, ours or that of other providers in that space, usually is that's much more exciting. We can do much more stuff with it. That kind of makes the most important and the most fun thing by definition, I would say, like live negotiation, even more exciting for us if we finally can use all of what we can do and all of what we want to in a solution. The second one is now purely talking about numbers. The Hackett Group ran a study this year showing that there's a 2.5x higher ROI from introducing any type of software, any type of improvement project these days, if it's done by companies that are digital leaders, okay? So the expertise in how can one best scale capabilities with digital solutions and what is the right fit in what space makes individual projects 2.5-fold as successful. And from my own experience, if I leave the procurement space almost completely for now, if you're a blue chip organization, and if as a blue chip organization you think about introducing a new process, changing something in your manufacturing plan, changing how you do marketing, changing and so on, usually 5x is like the minimum of ROI to achieve. That's important because you hardly will find an investment out there which is as clearly measurable as negotiations, and where the ceiling is so high if done correctly. So we've seen autonomous negotiation solutions rolled out with an ROI above 100. We've also seen solutions rolled out with an ROI significantly below that 5x. We will come to this at the end of the presentation again. And just like I said before, we have run the same survey a live group before. And just to wrap up the section, most people say that in terms of buyer experience, what they look for from an autonomous negotiation solution is something that excites buyers. In terms of outcome, getting better outcome dominates in speeding up the process. And just like you today, the next answers then gets the field a little more divided. So augmenting is a part of it, automating is a part of it, of the autonomous negotiation element. Just like for you today, there was also quite a difference back then in terms of capability gaps, and then clearer answers on both. Should that be a point solution that looks at the super specific spend, like tail spend, for example, or applied broader? And lastly, just like you today, the most people feel relatively excited about what's possible. So we started jumping right in and talking about the would you rathers and what you associate with the topic. So let us try for like a few minutes now to summarize a little bit and try to define a framework. What are actually autonomous negotiations, and what are good ones, and what are things that are lacking most often? And we do that first, and then we get into another interactive session together. So first things first, left-hand side here. What's an autonomous negotiation? Well, it's an AI-assisted strategic capability where an intelligent system independently manages part of the process. Okay, and that can mean recommending things, or it can mean fully automating things. The elements to look at, summarized here on the right-hand side, is of course in the procurement space, what type of spend is it addressing? Okay, so is that a solution that I'm using for my most strategic negotiations? Is that a solution that I use for like the lower end of my tail spend? That of course defines a lot of what I expect from a solution like this. Okay. Then the second one, and I think this is also a very clear demarcation line between what is available in the market at the moment, is that a solution helping me in like a bilateral negotiation approach where I have decided for one supplier, either because I want the supplier to win the business, or I don't have the time or means to really engage more of them and run a so-called bilateral negotiation or single supplier negotiation? Or is it something that works in a competitive case where the toolbox to pick from is significantly different? Or is it something that works in both cases? Okay, but that's like a key differentiator, as is, well, what does it actually negotiate about? Is it like the pure commercials, including like stuff like payment terms? Yeah, that has been very popular like 2-3 years ago to do the big payment terms renegotiations, but all of this is like commercials. Or does it also look at, does it also take a more holistic view and look at non-commercials as well? Yeah, like my service level, my quality differences, product differences, differences in effort. It requires me to work with one supplier rather than the other. So that's the second dimension. Third one, as I indicated before, is like the sheer scope. Okay, so does autonomous negotiation mean it helps me in the decision making of the negotiation and its implementation, or does it also help me before in preparation? So in other words, where does it start and where does it end? And I think that piece is probably also as a provider in that space, the biggest disconnect that we see in the field. Okay, and if you source a solution in that space, and you and the organization that you represent are looking for a different scope than the one the solution offers, that just always ends then in tears and frustration. So I would I would really advise you or give the recommendation to have a good look at this. And then surely also the process enablement. So is that like a standalone solution? Does it make sense that it is a standalone solution? Is that integrated into my workspace? Does it make sense to integrate it or not? So those are all elements. And I would say from my experience in that space now for realistically 7, 8, 9 years of digital solutions, that's something that people focus on quite a bit. To my surprise, the question, what type of negotiation technique is actually enabled with that solution, that oftentimes comes second. Trying to word it most neutrally. Roughly speaking, you can always cut and dice the world in different categories. We cut it here in 4. You can, as a negotiation technique, have a brute force. Okay, so you can automate the brute force technique of shaking the tree and hoping to catch some apples. Okay, you can also go into the space of negotiation technique of what I would call like simple win-wins. Yeah, so you can look at do we have another refinancing cost structure than our suppliers, and is therefore something to be done around payment terms, for example. You can also think about using like more traditional techniques. So in the competitive space, like standard e-auctions, but do that a little better. Or in like the bilateral case, something like the Harvard negotiation technique toolbox, for example. Or you use a little more advanced techniques. Yeah, so you use like a mix of traditional and advanced auction techniques, or you use behavioral sciences as well under the hood. I would always recommend to have a look at the solution and think about that for yourself. What is the negotiation technique under the hood that is actually required in my cases and that I want to automate in one fashion or the other? Okay, and then third element that we wanted to look at before we sum it all up and give give a little framework and guidebook is what's the AI under the hood. Okay. Again, one could categorize it in different areas. Roughly speaking, there's the whole Gen AI LLM topic, which is absolutely fantastic for training and onboarding, which until today is not really good for actionable advice in that sense. So believe it or not, even with all of the improvements, and you speak to one of the biggest LLM fans in the world, probably with me, even with all of the improvements, ChatGPT as of today still believes that in procurement you're negotiating prices upwards and not prices downwards. Okay, because it is trained on like public available information about an auction, for example, like Sotheby's, and doesn't even get that you are in the procurement space. That's not what it's good for. Where that intelligence comes from in all of the models that are out there in the market is from supervised and reinforcement learning in the machine learning space, where you basically combine the abilities that an AI has with business rules to be able to recommend / automatically pick a good negotiation approach. And then the third layer of it is conversational AI, which I think in the B2B procurement space is almost synonymously with the introduction of autonomous negotiations, because providers in that space used it first. And it makes solutions easier to use. Okay, so if you can chat with the thing and tell it what you want, and the thing chats with your suppliers, there's a ease of use. A little warning that I would put up here is that's not a negotiation technique by itself. So whether you ask via a chat window or whether you ask someone to click a button, that in itself is not a technique. So if you'd ask us, there are three elements that would need to come together to have a good autonomous negotiation. That is well, do they actually negotiate well? Okay, so do they use and apply a technique which is a good outcome and make something better, if you like? That is B, is the solution genuinely autonomous, and does it make something quicker and thereby scalable as well? And that is 3, is the solution able to handle more than just extreme niche case negotiation setups? So can you use it more often than you can use your existing process or your existing solution? To visualize that a little bit further. So impact here is a product of negotiation technique, autonomy, and wide applicability. If one of them isn't there, you will not have much impact. You can have the most advanced, most thought through, most detailed negotiation technique in the world. If you can apply it in your one special case in one category every 4 years, then the impact will not be very high. You multiply it at the same point in time, you can have something which is extremely easy to use. Second element here, but if it's like the most brute force negotiation technique that suppliers can figure out within the first 3 minutes, then your impact will also not be very high. Okay, so our core summary here would be impact is a function of technique, autonomy, and applicability. We'll go into first round of questions soon. I just saw a few things popping up in the chat. Everything that you heard from us in the last 5 to 10 minutes, we have brought that thing into an autonomous negotiation guide. You will automatically, after participating in that in this webinar here, get this guide emailed to you and can download it. Okay. So please keep adding your questions both in the chat and in the FAQ section. We have reserved quite some time at the end of today to answer as many questions as possible. I would like to invite all of you for the second interactive part of today's webinar, and we have summarized this as killer feature or snake oil. So we hope we summarized adequately what an autonomous negotiation could be, how one could define it, and surely have started a lot of thoughts in your mind. So what we would like to do next in about 2 to 3 minutes is for you to use the chat and tell us what you think killer features or snake oil for autonomous negotiations is. Let me define it first. First, what's a killer feature? Definition would be like it's a standout capability or function that makes a product vastly superior. And as you can all see on the right-hand side, a good recent example obviously is Tinder. There have been dating apps before, but Tinder revolutionized that market with simple functionality, swipe left or swipe right. It has led to a lot of dates, a lot of disappointments, a few marriages. For example, my aunt's marriage, ultimately, but I think we can all agree to that has been a killer feature. Okay, so that took something and changed maybe a smaller thing there and changed the whole game. What's like an example of snake oil? So first of all, snake oil is a product or feature that's marketed with exaggerated or false claims about its capabilities. So picture I like a lot here is that little gem we found. Let's just read through it. 20,679 physicians say Luckies are less irritating. It's toasted your throat protection against irritation, against cough. Okay, and then they apparently hired an ad agency and some accountants to say this is true. So that's like the example of snake oil. I would say, selling cigarettes as throat protection. So that would be an example of snake oil. Okay, so we hope we entertained you a little bit with those two examples. To summarize it again, a killer feature, something like the Tinder swipe left, swipe right. Snake oil, something which is marketed a lot, but definitely not worth it. Like throat protection via cigarettes, and now handing over to Sybil to tell us what we want from you.
So we're sure that the snake oil and killer feature section that Christian just took you through has triggered a few thoughts, and we'd love for you to share your thoughts with us in the chat. And we'll share a few live examples that we received from you with Christian, and we'll have a quick discussion around that. So what killer features do you hope for, and what snake oil do you fear with regards to autonomous negotiations? Please share your thoughts in the chat section.
Okay. And during that part, we will also take 2 to 3 minute break. We'll stop talking. Please be active, share your examples, then we will discuss them and see you back in like 2 minutes.
So Christian, we're starting to receive a few killer features and snake oil from our participants, and I'd like to share some of these with you.
Sure.
So one of the snake oil fear is using bad data and then negotiating with the said bad data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to translate that a little bit into my interpretation of the question and into a snake oil. Okay. So if someone tells you without any real data about any real negotiations, we can tell you where the right leverage points are. Yes, that would be snake oil. Any good negotiation is a function about either what you know about the market or what you learn about the market during the negotiations. So if you are in a case with competition, then you can actually use your competitive leverage to learn more about the market and then use it in the final rounds of the negotiation, and thereby make sure that your data is not bad data. Even in that case, though, it of course helps a lot if the system is trained on actual procurement negotiations and on actual procurement spend. Just like I said before, still today, if you ask ChatGPT to help you with a negotiation strategy, it doesn't really get that in procurement. Procurement, you want to minimize the price that you're paying and then maximize it. So absolutely with you there on that one. The last thing I want to say, this surely becomes even more important in the bilateral negotiation space, because you cannot use market leverage to get more information from the market to the same extent as you can use it in competitive space. So summary, absolutely agree. It's like the first snake oil thing that I would see, important in both domains. In the bilateral one, even more important than in the competitive one.
Christian, we also have a killer feature where a participant has shared that the ability to pull all market data, historical and predicted future market data, and then include it into a negotiation strategy.
Absolutely goes in similar vein, I would say. This is like almost the opposite of the case we had before. I would absolutely agree with MG, it says here on my screen, for this one. Yes, that would be a killer feature. Pull historical data, see where the market is about to go, and put that in your strategy. I would like to double click on it a little bit. So the data is not only like pure price data. That would make that a killer feature. That's also what type of market one operates in. So, for example, to make it a little more tangible, for a good negotiation technique, the information on whether that is a market that shows collusive behavior between suppliers, so that is a market kind of prone to operate as a cartel, is as important to have and makes as much difference to the negotiation technique than, for example, historic price developments. Okay, but they're both important.
We have another interesting killer feature, which is the ability to adjust tactics mid-negotiation based on supplier responses.
Yeah, I mean, there you will, I've met some of you. I see it in the chat. You know that I'm talking about this for ages, and also refer to it like in the first answer. The key secret of a good negotiation is that you not only react to what happened in the past and what you know about the market, but that you also react to what happens in the negotiation, okay? And that you ideally not only react to it, but that you go to the market, think of a technique, a format, a mix of traditional negotiation techniques and maybe sometimes auction techniques to actually extract information from the market. Okay, so the most important thing in any negotiation is information, and a real good negotiation technique uses the first round of information to learn more about the market than any historic data set can tell you, and then use it immediately to either change the way in which your organization runs in total, or at least defines parameters, arguments, anchor points that you give back to your supplier negotiation partner next.
Another really interesting killer feature, Christian, that a participant has shared is the ability to negotiate beyond just price.
Yes, I think that came across. I think that came across in the beginning as well. I think most solutions in that space, irrespective whether they're newer ones or whether they're existing negotiation software, largely focuses on price only, and payment terms is also price only. Whilst the majority of actual deals out there are always like a holistic decision. It's always like a price is one element, and then there's quality, and then there's service, and there's also oftentimes like a strategic decision on supplier landscape someone wants to have in a certain category. Absolutely agreed. The more a solution manages to go beyond the price or price similar elements and also bake in those other factors, that's a killer feature. And at the risk of doing a double click too far, would like to add one thing. One is to evaluate the other differences and bake them into the decision criterion. The real advanced element then is to also make those things negotiable. Okay, so to make a difference in service levels negotiable, or to make a deviation on general terms and conditions and negotiable, or to turn quality into a KPI that needs to be fulfilled, because otherwise it adjusts the price that is paid. So it's not easy for any autonomous negotiation solution to do that, but yes, the more it can do it and the more it can actually make it a negotiable and not only evaluated, the better the solution.
And we'll end the session with the final snake oil, Christian, where participant has said that pretending that the tool will work with poor preparation and can fully replace supplier relationship management on a broader scale.
Yeah, again, absolutely agreed. A negotiation solution, trying to say it mathematically, okay? A negotiation solution can only kind of optimize with the side conditions that exist in that case, and the side conditions are like a factor of a good category strategy, a good supplier management, a good supplier relation management solution, a good path to bring all of these together. What it can do, and I agree with you that it's that snake oil of thinking you can fix all of these things with just a negotiation. But if done well, a negotiation can also help you in your strategic supplier management. Okay, so I think we all know the approaches of like our supplier scorecards that we use to manage a relationship over years, sometimes over decades. Of course, if you link them to negotiation events, if like a consistent underperformance in the scorecard also has an impact on negotiations, yeah, so also make it harder and harder to win any new business, for example, that is one of the strongest levers for the supplier relationship management. And that's like an example where these things flow into each other: a good category strategy, good supplier relationship management, and negotiations, again, enforcing the messages to the suppliers, and so on and so forth. Okay, good. I saw a lot of additional questions. We'll, in an anonymized fashion, we'll make sure that we share more of these with you. We would now sum up that part, briefly tell you about a few things and experiences of what we saw in here, heard about killer features in snake oil, and then try to come back to the ROI topic and leave another 10 minutes for a final Q&A. So please feel free to add further questions. You can use the chat or the FAQ section of it, and you can also upvote questions of other participants there. We thought it might help just to summarize relatively very unfiltered what everyone asked us 2 years ago and what we honestly think should have been asked. So question number 1 also today is, for a solution provider, what is your integration roadmap with? And then it gets to the usual sourcing software, yeah? The Arebas of the world. The question that should have been asked and would have driven a lot of things differently for us, but I think in general in the market would have been, can I use that thing in Teams? Yeah, or my own front end, my own collaboration tool that I'm anyway using in my day-to-day work, to kind of run a negotiation, and then it updates everything that I need in the background, yeah, in my ERP system. Yeah, so We see companies out there really driving things forward and really getting to a much higher adoption level from their users. If the thing that they link it to not primarily is like the ERP system, which is oftentimes connotated also by the users, don't really want to use it, but rather with the day-to-day working tools. Second one, but we talked about this quite a while, so I'll jump over it relatively quickly. The question asked, basically in every discussion that you had in 2022, 3, and 4 was, can this be used to optimize my payment terms? A question that should have been asked, but I have the feeling anyway from the poll results and from the questions here in the chat should rather have been, where else can I apply it? What else I can negotiate other than payment terms? And last thing, as the question that was asked for quite a while, well, can Gen AI and LLMs not just do the same for me as an autonomous negotiation? I think one of the first questions I saw in the chat was the whole thing about data security. Yeah, but even leaving data security out of it, I think the main trend in LLMs itself has been the advent of agentic use. So the question that probably all of us would have liked to ask 2 or 3 years ago would have rather been, how can Gen AI use a business rule, a good solution, a good knowledge piece as an agent to improve my outcome? Okay, so the real difference that LLMs make for processes across companies at the moment is when they are used as an orchestrator, when they are used as an agent, picking up specialty knowledge and specialty information and turning it into a seamless process. In the interest of time, we will anyway send the full deck with the materials. We wanted to wrap up before the Q&A session with like the question we get most often, which is like, what's the business case for an autonomous negotiation? Again, partly speaking as a solution provider in that space as well. I'm not saying that we at Beroe are good in all of those things already with our solution, but to try to look at it as neutral as possible and let the numbers do the talking. What's an ROI? Okay. Yes, there's an element in the ROI which measures the time savings. Okay, so of course, the first way to look at it is to translate the time savings into a dollar value. But there's also, and that's the great thing about negotiations, there's also the incremental savings. Okay, there's also the element of, am I using a negotiation technique more often than I'm using it today that gives me a better result? And in every business case I ever saw, any client of ours or anyone who I ever consulted in my previous life, to look at the incremental savings are normally what dominates by far the time savings. Okay, and then that's like the upper part of the equation, so to say. And well, what's below the equation? Obviously, what you have to pay for it. That's the left-hand side, but also a very critical view on the time and effort for implementation and adoption. Okay, and that goes back a little bit to the impact overview we had. You can have the easiest to use solution in the world if no one wants to use it and you have to chase them all the time to do it, then you have a lot of time and effort for adoption. And if it doesn't give you a better outcome, then your incremental savings will not go up. So this is like the ROI, the return on investment. I said before, like in corporates, 5x is normally the minimum that someone wants to go for before introducing something. From 10x, the applause starts. In the negotiation space, it is possible to get way above that and thereby get a lot of recognition from the rest of the business. And I would say, I don't think there are many areas within a business that are so in the focus of bringing improvement via AI than procurement is at the moment. The business case checklist is, have you considered the quicker and the better on the left-hand side? Is everything translated into something that is comparable, and do you cover the total costs of a landed change? So we hope that so far for the first 50 minutes, the webinar gave you something to ponder about, something to agree with, something to disagree with. We would now use the last 10 minutes to answer a few more of your questions. As I've said, you can use the chat function, and you can also use the FNQ function, where you can also upvote questions from others that you would like to see answered. Okay, handing over to you, Sybil.
Thank you. So first we have a question from Laura, who'd like to know, it sounds like you have to have example negotiations to supply to the tool for it to learn your company's desired outcome. And is she thinking about this correctly?
Yes, she is. You got cut out there for a second on my end, Sybil. So let me just reread the question just to be sure that it was not only on my end. So Laura asked, it sounds like you have to have example negotiations to supply the tool for it to learn your company's desired outcome. Am I thinking about this, interpreting it correctly? Absolutely. The basis is like a good training data set and or the ability to learn your negotiation technique, but also your preferences on in general about supply chains, but also on the specific supply chain in this negotiation, and then take this all into account and come back to you ideally with a set of proposals of how this could work out. And yes, if the base data, let's say if the possibility of a negotiation tool is exactly one, yeah, if the technique is exactly one, then you can spare all of the things before, because then you're always applying that technique all the time. But if you don't want to do that, because techniques matter and techniques have to be adjusted to the situation at hand, then the better you input, the more it learns about you and your preferences, what you want to achieve, the better the solution can work.
Christian, if I could request you to also show our audience the next slide so they can scan a QR code and request a demo.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone. If you'd like to request a demo of an autonomous negotiation solution, which we do provide here at Beroe, called nnamu, please scan the QR code and you'll be able to request a demo with us. And we do have some more questions, Christian.
Okay.
So there's a question, can the autonomous negotiation really be independent, or will it require me to follow up with the vendor or internal stakeholders to cross-check the final agreement or take the negotiation further?
Mm-hmm. I like to spin it a little differently, to be honest with you. One question is can, but I would also like to say a few things about should. Okay, so can a autonomous negotiation in today's world do that without the buyer following up with the vendor and internal stakeholders? From my perspective, no. I have not seen a solution that can do that fully. I would also say I don't think it should necessarily. Okay, so if you're thinking about an autonomous negotiation solution to negotiate a 5,000 euro business or a 20,000 euro business, then the answer might be, well, ideally it should, because I have so limited time. I can never really look at it, and I want it to go that full way, although I haven't seen that yet. But if it's something that is much more crucial to your business, either due to spend or to criticality of the part and service that you're buying, which is a direct impact on your stakeholders or on the end product that you deliver for your clients. I would say it also should not have that ability, and you should rather, in that spaces, think about augmenting the capability and automate as much as you can do, but have the lever stronger into the augmentation space than in the fully automate space.
Thank you, Christian. Another question is, can you share some examples of different techniques that the system might use?
Sure. So I think the best combination always is if those techniques that buyers use successfully for decades, if not centuries, are baked into and matched with like market techniques. So to make a concrete example, I would say the strongest technique in all of single supplier negotiations is the power of no. Okay, so the strongest technique that you can have, it's super simple, but the strongest technique is if you can walk away. Okay, and an autonomous negotiation solution should, in that space, should find out, is there a walkaway point? How can it be used? How can it be used as a leverage? And then match it with like the Harvard negotiation concept, or like the behavioral science insights on how to split a pie and so on. If we're moving to the competitive space, there's like the very traditional negotiation techniques, which include stuff like, for example, a shortlisting, which is an extremely effective tool if actually used as part of the negotiation and not just to be done before the actual negotiation to get closer to the desired winner, and then pair it ideally with some advanced auction techniques. So my summary, I dropped a few examples over here. So you get a much better negotiation result in the competitive space if you use an advanced auction and pair it with a classic negotiation technique than when you use standard software to run single stage dumb auction, for example. I think I name dropped a few. The key is to combine them in a way that you use them to learn more about the supplier or suppliers that you're negotiating with, and when you combine techniques, just then using the simple hammer all the time.
Thank you, Christian. We do have another question that says, can you share a real case scenario of how autonomous negotiations has actually created a better outcome than the standard sourcing? And is it hard to measure that? We can take it as our final question for the day.
Okay, thanks. So measurement first. I think the number one business application that AI professors are looking at are procurement negotiations. Okay, and there's pretty marvelous and super entertaining work done that, for example, the MIT does. They run a negotiation tournament every 6 months. I would highly recommend for you to participate in there. Why is that? There is rarely a thing that can be measured as easily, not perfect, but as easily as a negotiation, because you start from a certain point, and that doesn't have to be pure price. That can be price and holistic criteria, and you end at another point, and you not only kind of have the qualitative feedback, which is like, does the buyer think it was a good result, or did it deliver the right supplier, but you also have a quantitative feedback. And that's why negotiations are really well measurable. Okay, real life examples of good autonomous negotiations, and I see that asked in another question, are relatively independent of the category. So that can work in your mechanical component as a manufacturing client that you bought for the last 30 years without change. That can also work in like the newest gadget, of a service that helps you improve your business processes. So the examples are everywhere, in all areas, if done properly.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian, for an amazing session. And thank you so much to our audience for attending today. We'll be sure to share the recording as well as our autonomous negotiation guide with you in a follow-up as an email. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.